place where we're going right now. The panorama of Jerusalem was started to be built close to 20 years ago now, and there was an attempt to recreate the looks of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. It was not necessarily related to any Christian project, but at that time Jerusalem was at its height, because just right around the birth of Christ, Herod the Great was upbuilding the city. The new temple was finished, and as it was still territory of the Roman Empire, various Roman buildings were built on the territory of the old city as well. So this panorama would give you a very good idea of how the city had looked like. So you won't have to use only imagination, but have something visual in front of your eyes. Of course, it's very, very different from what it is now. What is interesting about this panorama, that most of the buildings that are mentioned on this map, and there are thousands of them literally, are done not only as a very good scale model, but also a lot of research went into it, as they were recreating the panorama of the old city based on the archaeological evidence. And even until the present day, whenever there is a new found, various adjustments, changes or additions are made to this map. So it's quite fascinating for not only for lay people like ourselves, who know not too much about archaeology or history, to be a good illustration to what the city was all about, but also to the professional historians. Another interesting thing is, and when we'll be looking at the map, please see how large is the territory of the temple. And in antiquity it was quite typical for the Middle East that the temple to God, the sanctuary where people are gathering for worship, would be given a very significant place, because of course people depended on the well disposition of the deity, and religion penetrated all layers of their life. And ancient Israel was not any exemption from it, so the temple was given a very prominent place. And not only the temple was built, but even the Mount Moriah on which the temple was built was surrounded by the wall, and the western remnant of the western wall we saw there yesterday. It's also known as the Wailing Wall. And there is also a very interesting exhibit of the scrolls of Qumran. In 1947, a Palestinian boy who was a shepherd, was taking care of the goats, by chance lost a goat and was looking for it, and goat was nowhere to be found. And as there were many caves around, he was taking a little rocks and throwing them inside the caves, hoping that that sound would scare the goat and goat would come out. And as he was throwing stone into one particular cave, he heard a very strange sound as something was breaking. And as he got into the cave, he saw clay jars, and in one of the jars the cover was broken, scattered into the pieces by the stone that he'd thrown in there. And when he looked into the jars, he saw some strange scrolls. Most of them were done on parchment. So he and his relatives took the scrolls out of the cave and sold them to the antiquity dealers, and they started to be dispersed through various antique shops, and some of them made to Europe. But whatever was remaining back get into the hands of the French father priest archaeologists, who were excavating a very interesting site not far from the place where those scrolls were found. They were excavating a site of a religious community, as was apparent by a number of ritual baths that, based on the witness of Josephus Flavius and some other historians of the time, looked like the community of the East Essenes. It was a proto-monastic Jewish community, very self-conscious and very righteous, who put themselves into the opposition with the temple clergy, whom they've seen quite corrupt and controversial, just as the clergy that we observed this morning in the Church of Nativity, or maybe even to a greater degree. So, it was not a Pharisaical, it was not a Sadducean community because they believed in resurrection. They were a very eschatological community that was filled with a sense of the Messiah that is coming at any given moment. So, and of course it was a great discovery, and the French fathers were right on top of it because they realized that most likely they found the library of the Qumran community. So quite a bit of research went into it, and most of the scrolls were traced where they have been sold and recovered. And the remnant that was not sold yet were also brought to this community. And Father Deacon Alexander yesterday pointed out at the French Archaeological Institute, not too far from the Jaffa Gate, where those scrolls were originally looked at. Of course, in 1947, the State of Israel was created here on Palestinian territories, and for the Jews that was a very good and important find, because there was not too many tangible historical evidence exists from the time even of around Christ and before him. In fact, when we're talking about the Old Testament history, even among the Jewish scholars, Jewish religious scholars, there are two categories of people. There are maximalists, they're taking biblical account as a historical document and trying every archaeological found to pry a proof of what is being said in the Bible. And there are minimalists who are really saying that the history of Israel did not start with Abraham. They never were to Egypt, and really the Torah and the scriptures were assembled and given as big of a prominence for the creating of one nation among disintegrating tribes as they were returning back from Babylon captivity, i.e. there were some tribes living in Israel and in Judea, more or less unified by the same religion, but they didn't have any value as of a state, and after Babylonians came and make them captive there for 70 years, it is in the imprisonment that they became one nation. They came back, and in order to create a state, in order to create an identity, all the scriptures were put forth. So those are two mutually exclusive attitudes to the ancient history, but I'm mentioning it only to explain of how important the find of those scrolls was. So most of them, even prior to research, was purchased by the State of Israel, and some years later, when Museum of Israel was created, a beautiful building was built where some of the scrolls are housed, and you'll be able to see some of the authentic fragments of the scrolls of Qumran, and also some other items from that community that were discovered in the archaeological excavations. This means that he was a visitor in Jerusalem. We're all looking at the scripture and trying to interpret it in some mysterious sense, totally eliminating the historical element from it. Scripture is by far more wondrous than that. But when trying to say, if we'll try to look in the terms of the day and eschatological expectation, and John and Jesus both preaching about the end of the days, you know, here's at the door. So it's very important to remember that there were many people who expected this eschatological redemption. And it's not perhaps a transgression to assume that it was amidst the Essenes that all that have taken place, especially that there is some historical evidence that we're living close to the Mount of Zion. Okay, so let us move now to the other side.
The question is where you are, when you will.
Right through that door. See the door right there? It's surrounded by this little rock wall.
You see, it's a rock, it's called wall. This is the door.
Go to a door. Probably just about the
Maybe
same
tonight
place.
we do it
Right there. We're gonna get to a door. We'll touch the door. Just on the other side, it's all that. Now, you know, remember the church with the two gray rooms? It's just on the other side of that.
About God
Right, you see that door? Just right
was
there.
revealed on the cross.
And we're actually
but
going
this
to
is the
come.
temple.
That's where those stages.
What was found recently, there was found some of the temple. Well, of course, everybody knows where the temple is, but what was found from the temple, there were found big tubes where the blood of the sacrificial animals would be running into the Kedron Valley, into the Gehenna. They had to have a whole sewage system because there were so many, they were saying as many as 100,000 animals sacrificed during the feasts, because everybody wanted to bring some sacrificial animal, and everybody wanted to be cleansed from the sins, and such was not only the custom but the religious demand. So it was a very interesting thing. Just to say that Samaritans, who consider to be Mount Gerizim to be the holy mountain, do the animal sacrifices even until the present day. So, and it was a very interesting article in one of the Jewish magazines when students of yeshiva who were talking about the restoration of priesthood and temple went there, and they saw all this gore and blood and stench and everything else. Isn't that what we're praying for? So the morals and attitudes of the time have changed. Okay, so this is the temple, and you can see how large it is in proximity to the city. Of course, when we're looking at the outlayer of the city, it is not as big. But when we're talking about the central part of the city, it takes a good third of the historical place. Yes.
This goes directly into the temple.
It goes directly into the temple, correct.
So Christ would have ended that way when he was going to the temple to
Correct.
worship.
Well, there was something like that, and he probably went through the gate and dismounted from the gate. Okay.
Now we build shopping malls.
5 courses.
Well, let's see.
Oh, the pool.
There's one too.
The pool of the pool. The sheep's gate and the pool.
The ship's gate and the Bethesda, where we were yesterday when we just entered through the gate. So this gate was restored over here. So the ship's gate, and we went. Of course, it looks nothing like that. Remember the fortress destroyed, and as we went into the city, Father Deacon Stedman pointed out and saying that Roman fortress right over there, so we passed by it, and that was a temple mount, the remnant, but now it's Muslim quarters, and the golden, Dome of the Rock stands on the place where Temple in Jerusalem stands right now. So yes, this is yes.
Where's the judgment? I mean, where he said, "Behold the man," the arch.
That would have been in the.
The arch would have been constructed. I don't think that would be inside.
Would be inside.
A little bit inside, yes. I don't know if it is.
В 70-м году. Во время его.
No, you can't. No, Solomon's temple was destroyed in 7th century BC. It would be approximately on the same spot, not approximately, but exactly the same spot, but it was much smaller. It was different. If you ever in Jerusalem and you can go to the museum of the Tower of David, and there are very interesting exhibit where three: the Skinny of the Covenant, and then the Temple of Solomon, and then the Temple of the Hero the Great, given in proportion one next to the other, and up close. It's not quite as big, but you can see it also, all three parts one next to the other. So, but unfortunately here, of course, it's the Herodian. It's a Herodian thing. I don't know why the arch here is the man is not reconstructed, but it may be right on the side of the Antonia fortress.
Coming out this way.
Coming out this way, correct? Yeah, but on that side,
Right.
not inside the fortress, on the outside of the fortress. A little bit right over here between the Bethesda and this that wall.